Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking Magazine's bi-weekly podcast. I'm your host and Fine Woodworking editor Tom McKenna, and with me this episode are Executive Art Director Mike Pekovich.
Hey guys.
Special Projects Editor Matt Kinney.
Hello everyone.
And our web producer Ben Strano, who's sitting in the corner. And we also have Jeff Rose, as always, kind of trying to keep us on track and on time. Before we get started, I do have to take care of some business. This episode of Shop Talk Live is brought to you by Minwax Wood Stains and Finishes. Whether you're bringing old wooden furniture back to life or building a future heirloom, Minwax allows you to create a piece you'll love forever with easy-to-apply wood stains and durable protective finishes. With a wide range of colors available, from traditional wood tones to custom decorator colors, there's a color to fit every project and every home. Not to mention that feeling of personal satisfaction when you step back and look at a beautiful piece you created yourself or for your family. Learn what made with love, finish with Minwax truly means at minwax.com/madewithlove. All right, let's get rocking and rolling here. We do have a new episode of the Highland Woodworker TV show just rolled out probably a couple weeks ago, right, Ben? Like 2 weeks ago. Episode number 25. Matt Kinney is one of the featured people in it. It's did the finer points for that episode, but figured we'd talk about it a little bit and talk, Matt.
Well, I have a question for you, Matt. You were demonstrating your little mitering technique for boxes using a nice little shooting board.
Yes. That's
sort of like a giant version of the shooting boards that I use for Kumiko as well.
I knew it was going to come back to you, Mike.
It's not. No, here's my question. When I'm doing the Kumiko parts, I have like a little sliding stop block just to make the pieces exactly long. You did not, in the video, you weren't showing a stop block on yours for your little box side. I was wondering if you ever use a stop block to make sure that your ends end up exactly the same size.
My answer to that question, Michael, is two parts.
Part A.
Part the first. That I did make a stop for that jig that would that I could clamp to one of the rails with a little clamp, but I found that it didn't really work very well because the miter is so sharp.
Gets right underneath there.
That it gets underneath there. So it works fine when you're doing the first miter, but when you turn that around to do the second miter, it's not reliable. Mm-hmm. And what is actually nice about the technique I use is that I cut all my parts to length before I put them in the little shooting board jig. So what you can do is very easily line up the bottom corner of that edge that's about to be mitered, the one that will be the point afterwards, with the place where the ramp starts. And that gives you, then you know that you're not going to take any length off the board when you miter it, and then you just flip around and do it again. And if you want help aligning that, you can take the head of a combo square and you put the 45-degree angle-y part down on the ramp, right? And then when you slide the piece up to the, you just align that with the ramp and where it ends, and then you slide your piece up to it, and boom, there it goes.
Whoops, there it is.
Didn't I get that right?
You lost me there, but I got the whole thing about aligning it to the bottom of the ramp.
Yeah.
That bottom corner. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, if you put a combo square on there, right, and you got the ramp.
Yeah, but it's going to hit that top corner. It's going to be inset.
And then you do. Yeah, I've never done it.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
So, know.
What was your second point?
That was point. The second was that you don't need a stop because with all these little things, you're cutting them the length first and then mitering them. Right. And I do that because if you want your box to come out square, not only does the joint have to be accurate, you have to have an accurate 45 or whatever. It has to be complementary, but you're going for accurate 45 degrees. But also the two ends and then the two sides have to be, the two ends have to be the same length and the two sides have to be the same length. So I separate out those two operations, cutting to length first to ensure that they're the same length, and then mitering without removing any length.
Right.
And you end up with a square box with accurate joinery.
Yeah, Kumiko is a little bit different because most of the joints, the little peak of the joint is centered on the stock, so it's not slipping underneath. And I'm also busting out all those parts just with a little Japanese saw and saw hook. So I always cut those over length. So I'm depending on the stop block for that final length. But.
Yeah, I have used the jig to cut pieces that have a 45 on both faces.
Right.
So they come to a little point for a little bird's mouth joint.
Exactly.
Like I use in my boxes.
Yep.
And when you do that, you can in fact use a stop because the point is up in the middle of the board, so it'll go into the flat of a stop, and it's not going to slide under.
Right.
So, I mean, when you do that, though, you have to mark on your jig where the shoulder. You want to mark where the shoulder is.
Yes.
Right?
Just make a couple extra pieces.
You don't.
Reset it.
I've never done that either.
Never done that.
If you have a stop, it doesn't matter where you don't have to mark the shoulder.
Cool.
Very good.
Well, you can see more of Matt live, recorded on the Highland Woodworker TV show. Chuck Brock, the host of that show, also visited with Kelly Maxwell, who was talking about working with big slabs, and was Moment with a Master was Worth Squire, a Nashville woodworker who I guess specializes in elaborate inlay work and marquetry work. So cool episode.
Yeah, he had a technique I hadn't heard of before. I don't do a lot of marquetry with the thin parts, but usually they're taped together in little bricks or something. He actually glued the layers together with high glue.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. And then he gets them apart with putting them on an iron and spritzing it with a little bit of water, and the parts
that was the coolest thing.
Flip, separate immediately. It was really neat.
Yeah, I mean, two things about it. One, he does that because that's the whole bevel technique, right? Where you angle the table of the saw and you cut it, and then when you put the pieces back together,
it slides right in.
It's like the Michael Cullen bandsaw technique where you cut the outside out at a taper, so when you fit it back together. But what
there's not the width of that curve.
The width of the curve is taken out of the equation.
Right.
What I noticed about the iron is I absolutely guarantee you that was a brand new iron.
It was.
That was a brand new iron. He was like, "Oh, I can't use my old iron. It's gonna stick." New iron, which is funny, because one of the things that you hear a lot, I hear a lot from readers, is they complain about how clean the shops are in our photos.
Yes.
And they think that, guys go out of their way to clean up their shops for us. And
well, I think they do.
Some of them do, not all of them. Some guys are really fastidious and keep a clean shop just by nature.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've had some interesting photo shoots where I had to actually help clean the shop just so I could set up lights.
There are guys like that. I mean, Michael Fortune's shop. My first photo shoot there, he told me he really liked me because I could remember where he put down all the tools he was using. He'd be like, "Where's my this?" And I'm like, "Oh, you put that in the other room on the thing next to this." And you'd go, "Oh, yeah, right." But in his shop is like he's always building like 4 things, so it's always kind of messy.
Yeah, there's always something going on.
Yeah,
especially with the pros. And I know it does drive. I don't want to go too far on a tangent, but every time we shoot at Garrett Hack's shop, we make him take his workbench away from the window and spin it around every time because when he works, he likes to look out the window. When we want to take photos, we want him facing us inside the room, so we make him spin it. It's always fun.
Yeah, most authors, if they've worked with us multiple times, they're sort of prepared to, all right, you want to move the bench. And one particular author who didn't work with us very often, but I said, "I want to move your bench," and his eyes got really wide. It's like, "What? You want to move my bench?" And so we moved it, and it was all okay. And then moving it back, there were little alignment marks on the floor.
Oh.
About moving the bench back. And, it's like, okay, we moved it. He had one end, I had one end. And it's just like, we were within a 16th of an inch of these marks on the floor. And I said, "How's that?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll take care of it later." And like you just knew that 16th of an inch was not close enough. So,
well, I know who that is, and he only responded as well as he did to you because I had broken him first on moving it, and when I asked him to move it, it was like a 30-minute conversation to convince him to move it. It was, oh man.
All right. Well, anyway, folks should check out the Highland Woodworker TV show. You can see it at thehighlandwoodworker.com. Let's move on to some questions. This first one comes from Chris, and Chris says, I'm just getting into woodworking and have neither the space nor the budget for power tools, so I'm starting with hand tools. I see a lot of options for hand saws. What would be the best approach to order of purchasing? I am currently leaning toward a crosscut saw, but that is not a very informed decision.
First off,
oh yeah, I think you're going to talk about the same thing I would talk about.
I think
first.
we're going to talk about the same
first
thing.
off, the idea of working with hand tools in
Saving
regard to
money.
any budgetary consideration whatsoever.
That's first mistake.
Especially, it's like he's like saying, I'm going to buy hand saws. What orders? So he's talking about buying numerous hand saws.
Yes.
And okay, so you're going to buy some hand saws. Well, you want to get quality hand saws. Bad Axe, Lee Nielsen, Veritas, whatever. Blackburn Tools, whoever. It ain't cheap. And by the time you buy the saws that you need,
you're going to need more.
you've spent the same amount as you would have spent buying a table saw, a good table, decent table saw.
Right.
But I guess it breaks it up.
But we're never one to discourage anyone from buying anything.
Right.
So.
But I think that's the big notion is you're when you go hand tool, if that's your mantra, I'm going hand tools only, it's not for money. It's a false, budget.
Because you'll still spend a lot of money. But the thing is, you do get to break it up. I mean, you can, instead of spending $1,500 at once to buy a table saw, you can break that up over a period of years.
Yeah. And when we were talking about this in our pre-production meeting, Mike raised a really interesting point that kind of directed him toward guidance. It depends on whether you truly are going hand tool only with your woodwork, or in the future, do you plan to get power tools involved? And that sort of will kind of guide your purchase decision.
Right. If you're actually ripping and cross-cutting stock down to final dimension, that's going to introduce more tools. If you're working primarily with machines and you bust out a saw to cut dovetails, well, that's easy. Get yourself a back saw with a rip pattern, and that's the only saw you'll need. And then you start to expand from there. Well, what if I want to cut my own tenons? What if I want to cut parts to length? Then all of a sudden you start to broaden your saw kit just a little bit.
All right, so here, I just had a thought, a moment of inspiration.
All right.
Here's the correct answer to this gentleman's question. Chris. How you doing, Chris?
Feeling the love.
Okay, so no matter what, if you're going to go all hand tools for the rest of your life, or you're going to eventually get into power tools and hand tools, the first thing you want to do is go to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy a circ saw. Because your circ saw will allow you to break down materials. All right? You can cross-cut and rip rough boards with a circ saw.
Okay.
And then your first hand saw should be a joinery saw. And I would get a carcass saw, I believe. It's big enough to do some tenon work with, but also small and agile enough to do dovetails, all your dovetails. And then, see, because if you were just to buy, say, a rip panel saw or crosscut panel saw first, well, all you're going to be doing is breaking down materials for a while. So get some, and you can get a good circ saw for just $50 or $60 or whatever, maybe $100. And then you get your joinery saw, and you can cut joinery, which is really what you need to be doing to make furniture. So, and then later, if you're going to stay with hand tools, you get your panel saws. And but if you're gonna, then later you could get a table saw or whatever.
Right. And actually, you did that article a while back. Was that with Chris Gochner, where it's sort of like your first back saw.
Yeah.
One saw that does it all.
One saw that does it all. So if you're going to start out, what one should I get? And I think he weighed it with, okay, it's got to rip and crosscut, which traditionally a saw is either designed to rip or crosscut, which is kind of a misnomer because both saws will do both, just one better than the other.
Yeah.
And I think he recommended, like, it was a back saw that was slightly bigger. Were those carcass saws?
Yeah, they were carcass saws.
And some of them, some rips patterns did really well. The Lee Nielsen crosscut pattern, actually, he really liked. So it's not supposed to rip, but it did a good job. And then there are the hybrid sharpenings, which are sort of halfway between a rip and a crosscut pattern, which supposedly do both really well. And that actually kind of turned out to be the case for a lot of saws.
Yep, he liked the Bad Axe one, I think.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I think that's what I would do. Get a circ saw and then get a carcass saw.
All right.
there it is.
The final answer.
Oh.
Let's move on to question number 2. This one comes from June. I understand why you don't want to use the ruler trick while honing a chisel, but would it be all right to use it to true up the backs of bevel up plane blades, such as block planes or bevel up smoothers? I don't use the ruler trick.
Yes.
Yeah, and the difference is the reason why you don't want to back bevel on a chisel is because the back of the chisel is your reference edge when working with the tool. So if you're pairing a peg flush or something like that, if there's a back bevel, you actually have to lift up the tool off its back in order to get it to cut flush with the surface, which is a pain in the butt, and it's not really the way the tool was meant to be used. On any hand plane, however, the reference surface is the sole of the plane, not the back of the iron. So who cares what's going on with the back of the iron as long as you're getting a polish all the way to the edge, which the ruler trick does. It just alleviates having to flatten a lot of steel to get flat. And the only thing I'd say is depending on the brand of low angle plane you're getting, some new planes, the backs are already polished and flat to a really high degree so that the ruler trick, you're just kind of throwing away the work that the plane manufacturer put into getting that blade flat.
Right.
So
check them.
I check them. What I would do, I have like 3 grits of sharpening stones, 1,000, 4,000, 8,000. I would take a new plane iron to my 4,000 grit stone. So it's relatively hard. I make sure it's dead flat. I don't want to take it out of flat. And I'll just sort of work the back for just a couple minutes and check the scratch pattern. If my scratch pattern is all the way to the edge of that blade, I'm not going to use my ruler on that because it's a lot easier to sharpen. You know, once you're flat, it's easier to sharpen without the ruler than with the ruler. But if there's an obvious hump, if I'm not hitting the corners, if I have to remove a lot of steel to get flat, forget it, pulling out a ruler. It puts just a really moderate back bevel, which lets me polish just to that edge. And then that blade, from then on, I'm using a ruler to sharpen that iron.
Yeah. I mean, the ruler is just really, it's the secondary bevel trick applied to the back of a plane blade.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Yeah.
All right. That was easy.
Yeah.
It is time for our all-time favorite technique of all time for this week. You want to hit us, Matt?
I would love to hit you, but I will tell you my technique instead. So my technique this time relates to dovetailed cabinets that have rabbets in the back of them for a back. And the problem, let's say you have 3 dovetails at the corners, right? And the problem is that you can't just take your parts to, let's say, your table saw and run them over a dado set to make a rabbet for the back because you will mess up. You'll see that groove, that rabbet in the joint when it comes together.
Yes.
Right. If you just do standard through dovetails that are beautifully symmetrical, and which is what I like. So in the past, what I would do is I would cut my dovetails, glue the carcass together when it was time, and then I would take it to my router table and use a rabbeting bit.
Which is really fun.
Yeah, so you have this colossal, this cabinet, standing up, and you're standing up on its back edge, and you're running it around. And so, one, you can't have a fence up there, so the bit's not buried in a fence. Dust collection is sort of out of the question because, well, I have under-table dust collection, but a lot of it just gets caught inside the cabinet as you're moving it around. So
then you have to square up the corners afterwards.
And you have to square up the corners, and there's a lot. Usually, I have a 2-inch diameter rabbet bit, which if you use a smaller one, it decreases the amount you have to square up, but still, there's a substantial amount that you have to square up. And it's also, you run into problems like if you've got grooves for shelf dividers or whatever, the bearing can kind of dip into that groove.
Oh, right.
As you're going around because you had to do that groove before you glued up the case, right? So I've stopped doing that because for all those reasons. And what I do now, and this is my technique, is that after I've cut my dovetails, but before I do anything else, I go to the router table and I do stopped rabbets. And you can control, so you can cut further into the joint.
Sure, right.
And actually, on two of the boards, on the tail boards, I'm able now to cut them to such a degree that there's no material to remove after the joint goes together from the tail board. And it's only on the pin board, and there's only a tiny little amount to remove by doing stopped rabbets with the rabbiting bit.
Do you use stop blocks on either end or just little layout lines to get you close?
We'll say that I do something smart like that.
He kind of stole my thunder.
I do it by eye.
We should have talked about this before.
Oh, was that what you were going to talk about?
No, mine is related, but I do the. I'm making a cabinet now with I'm going to put a plywood back in, and I had to do stopped rabbets on the top and the bottom, but I kind of did I don't use stop blocks, but I use just a little tick mark. I can just eyeball it, and I put a mark on the board and on my fence and stop there. But
Mike modified your dovetail joints for this reason.
Yes, so instead of having my little half pin on the back, I have a half tail, which is wider than the depth of the rabbet. I rabbet the parts first, and then I just do sort of like a little stepped shoulder at the back of the top. The pins boards has a little stepped shoulder to, in essence, fill in that gap that rabbet would normally make if they were just cut all the way to the shoulder line. But in terms of routing that rabbet, I actually, because many years before I even knew what a router table really was, I just took my handheld router.
Oh, man.
And I just balanced it on that 3/4 inch thick, bookcase back, with a little bearing guided bit. And the corners were good because it was sort of supported on both the top and the side of the case. But then once you came off the corner,
right. Yeah, not working very well.
But that was woodworking.
Yeah, I used to do that with a trim router, and it was even more dicey because there was less of a balancing point on it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So the other thing you can do is do a partially mitered dovetail where just the ends are mitered. I think John Petro did that on his little firewood box. That's
for
really
handwork recently. Yeah, you could do that as well. But for me, I use that technique for aesthetic reasons. I want my dovetails to be symmetrical across that joint, and I want the half pins on the edges and all. I want that look. And so it does force my hand in terms of technique.
Yes.
Yeah. And so so far that's the best way to do it that I've found.
It's a lot less unwieldy, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's really routing the boards while they're still boards instead of a case.
I never did what Matt had done, so I don't think I would have wanted to try that, the full box. But I've never.
For a lot of the small cabinets that I make, it's not a big deal. But I've done it with big cabinets, and it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Well, since Matt started the discussion, I am on rabbets and stopped rabbets. My all-time favorite technique of all time for this week was actually a repair job where I was cutting the first stopped rabbet on my top, and I was just taking too heavy of a cut, and so as soon as I put the board into the bit, it just blew out the back end. I was fortunate that the chip out was sort of shallow of my cut line, so what I wound up doing is I just ran the bit through and stopped it at the back end, and figured I could patch it. And now, when I've done repairs, I usually I try to get a grain match that's perfect. And I was trying to figure out how I was going to repair it. And I had cut a strip first, and I was playing with how it would appear. And I was like, wow, it's going to tip up when I clamp it. I wanted it a little bit proud. So I wound up taking, when I was doing the router setup, I had some work pieces from that were cutoffs from my top and bottom and sides. And I routed some rabbets in it. And so what I wound up doing is I took a cutoff from the rabbeted, scrap piece and basically put it into the patch area. And so I could get clamping pressure across, top and bottom, and then across the board. And then I just hand planed it flush, where, I used a handsaw where it was kind of thick, and the patch came out pretty smooth. And I didn't have what I was worried about with just a strip kind of patch, when you put clamps on it, it's easy for the clamp to just kind of tip it up just a bit so you have a gap there. And I wound up with a perfect gap-free patch that hopefully no one will notice. It'll haunt me forever.
We will now.
Oh, go ahead.
Here's one thing about patches that always bothers me is that you need to make a patch in something, say for a miscut dado or whatever, and you find, you're like, oh, look at this grain. It's going to be a perfect match. And then you glue it in, and then you go, ugh, I have to now hand plane it down to make it flush, right? And so your perfect grain match was on the top, which could see, and now you're hand planing it away, and by the time it's flush, it's like, it's not a good grain match anymore.
Huh.
Well, it's close. I mean, in my case, I was fortunate. It wasn't a corner, and so the corner that's exposed is probably going to be, half an inch or so. So, like I said, it will haunt me forever.
But that your technique, I think the really important thing I learned was that whenever I used to make patches, I used to try to make the patch exactly the right size. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, forget it. Make it big, make it overly thick, overly wide, and just make sure it's tight. And then you pare things down. And then also, we were doing this little table from a board class at Mark Adams, and the legs have little sort of posts at the top that are sort of cut down. So the tops of the legs end up to be a smaller dimension than they were originally. And we had one mortiser setup that was cutting mortises just a little too deep at the top of the leg. So by the time we brought that down to the square post on a couple tables, the little mortise bit kind of blew through just a little bit. And rather than just try to find something to fit in that little square or something, we just went to a router table, raised the bit up a little bit, and skimmed off maybe a heavy 1/16 of an inch off the entire face, and then glued on an oversized patch and brought everything down. So a lot of times, patches that seem to be overkill, like you blow out a little mortise for your buttons that attach a tabletop on the side of an apron. You actually plane the whole thing down, reface that entire face, and then mill it down. It sounds like overkill, but no.
But then, because then all the glue lines are on places you won't see.
Exactly.
Whereas if you glue that patch in,
it's always going to be a patch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas, you're just talking about gluing on a new veneer, sort of, to cover up the mistake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
That was one of the techniques I believe Steve Latta recommended in that Fixing Mistakes article, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike.
What? Sorry, what?
Nothing. Pointing out it's from Steve Latta.
Oh, it's from Phil Lowe before Steve Latta, but that's okay.
And plus, if you invented it, it would involve blue tape. This
is true.
Let's move on to Mike's favorite technique of all time for this week.
Does it involve blue tape?
No, it doesn't. It's I just made a little cutting board, and actually made it in two halves. And I connected the two halves with a little dovetail batten going across the bottom. And I actually didn't think of that either. Rodney Diaz, who's actually the deputy art director of Fine Home Building, he used to be my assistant at Fine Woodworking. Anyway, he's an awesome woodworker. He was using this technique of making little cutting boards with little batten feet going across, and it kept them nice and flat, and it gave it a really elegant look. So anyway, I stole that idea from him, and it's a really cool technique, the notion of holding two parts together with the batten, and it not only applies to this little cutting board, which was kind of neat, but also you can use it for like tabletops to sort of trestles at the top of a sort of a trestle table. You can use it for just regular battens on pieces. And anyway, and actually, who did the article in that? Was that
Chafin?
No.
Andrew Hunter?
Andrew Hunter did that.
That's right.
And actually showed a few different ways. And he actually got kind of fancy in doing more like a tapered dovetail batten across the entire length. Because that's a problem with the dovetail. It's like if it's loose enough to slide, it's probably not tight enough to keep it really, really tight.
Right.
And on the cutting board, it was such a short distance, I just like whacked it through with a hammer. But on really long tabletops and stuff, that little tapered dovetail works really well.
If it fits tight enough to be a good fit, then as soon as you put glue in it, it no longer goes in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and actually in this case, I didn't glue the battens in at all because the cutting board was in two halves. There's a little chamfer at the middle, so I wasn't trying to hide the fact that it was two boards. So I pounded in the batten to bring the two pieces together, and then I just pinned the tops into the batten, maybe 3/4 of an inch away from that little joint on either side. So that locked it in the center and still allowed the size to expand and contract along the length of the batten. And it gave it a nice little decorative element too. So
how did you ensure an even gap between the parts? Did you have a shim?
I busted out my 7-degree dovetail blade on the table saw, and I used that to cut the groove, the slot, I guess, that the dovetail dado in the halves on the table saw, and just flipped it for last cut to get that opposite wall. And then I left that in my table saw at the same height and ripped my battens at exactly that same angle and just adjusted it. And from there, I didn't just make a square piece of stock and try to cut that dovetail shape into it. I had a wider, say a 4-inch wide board that I kind of made dovetailed shapes on either edge of that. And I could like test that fit and then finally rip those off at the bandsaw to create my battens.
I was talking about in terms of when you're putting the piece together, how did you keep the gap between the two boards?
There's no gap. There was just a slight chamfer at the joint.
All
so
right.
there's a visual sort of chamfer where they met, but it was tight.
Yeah. Mike knew what you were asking. He just wanted to tell everybody about the other stuff. So he was just...
All right. Let's get on to some more questions. This one is from Greg. And Greg says, I recently built Christian Becksford's small shaker wall cabinet. The case is built using half-blind dovetails. I tried numerous methods to make this joint by hand, including using Tim Rousseau's tips. Let's just say the process was very frustrating. Can you tell me what techniques you guys use and offer any tips and tricks to help out us less experienced folks?
Half-blind dovetails, the only real challenge there is just clearing out the waste in that little socket because it doesn't go all the way through. And without fail, when I have students cut half-blind dovetails, I really try to drive home the point, clear out the waste in the corners. Because if it doesn't fit, there's waste in the corners. And then even after I say that, someone will come up and say, this doesn't fit. And I'll say, well, the corners aren't cleared out. Nope, I did. Pull it apart, clear out the waste in the corners, and then it pulls it together. And one indicator that the waste in the corners are keeping it apart is if you have a gap both at the end of the dovetail where it fits into the socket and then also at the shoulder of the joint. If there's double gaps there, it just means something inside is holding you up. So really make sure on the bottom of the joint where there really isn't any glue strength there that you really want to pare down even to slightly undercut on the sides of the pins and tails. That's where your glue joint is. You want to make sure that's nice and tight. But anywhere else, it's either flat to undercut and really work into those corners, either with a knife or get yourself, a pair of skew chisels or something like that.
Yeah. One thing I started to do, and I learned it from Steve Latta, was cutting a shallow rabbet on the tailboard, especially when I do half blinds, because it gives me a really tight shoulder to register the workpiece for the tail layout.
Yeah, that's relevant to what I was going to say, because dovetails, Mike said the only challenge was cleaning out the sockets. And I mean, in a way that's kind of right, but I would say actually the dovetails really start after you cut the tails. That's when dovetailing really starts, because that's when you're going to transfer the tails to the pin board, and you've got to do that accurately, right? Because if you mess that up, then it doesn't matter what you do afterwards. You're not going to have a good joint. So you have to transfer the tails to the pin board accurately, and there are things that you can do to improve the accuracy there. For example, what Tom just mentioned, there's the old Chris Becksford trick where you make a little scrap of wood, a little block of wood, not a block really, but a little sliver of wood that fits into your bottom groove.
Yeah, for drawers, right?
That's right.
And so, for drawers. And there are other ways. Mike's blue tape transfer thing, trick for transferring. So there are a lot of ways to improve the accuracy. And then after you transfer, it does come down to an issue of cleaning out the tail sockets and the pin board, and making sure there's no waste. And like you said, for half blinds, you can do skew chisels or fishtail chisels or what have you to really get in there and clean out.
Right. And then for cleaning out, it's because you can't saw out that waste. I've set up a router with a straight bit and a fence to sort of, you have to stay away from the corners, from the edges, but you can, establish most of the socket with the router bit. And by hand, a lot of times we'll just have students, we'll just set up a drill press and we'll just drill a line of holes along that baseline. At least makes the chopping out a little bit easier. But you're absolutely right. Most people are sort of freaked out at the notion of sawing a dovetail with a handsaw, like the sawing is the toughest part. It's not.
No.
It's getting the layout exactly where you want it, because then if it's not right, even if you hit your line, you don't have a joint that fits.
Right.
And if your layout is exact, and even if you saw a little away from your line and pair to it, you're still, the probability of getting a nice joint is much, much higher.
Yeah. And I think with this particular cabinet, if I remember correctly, it has a face frame, right?
Yes. It has a supplemental top and bottom, so I think the half blinds are completely hidden.
Yeah, and does it have a face frame? I think it does. I mean, because it's a little shaker cabinet.
Yeah.
So it has a face frame, and the top and bottom are hidden as well. So I'm going to suggest something that I've talked about before that some people turn their nose up at. But why are you even cutting half-blind dovetails here? One, you could just cut through dovetails because it's all going to be hidden. But two, if you really want half-blinds, cut through dovetails and then glue on a nice thick veneer, not a thick veneer, but like an 1/8 inch veneer or whatever, and make them look like half-blinds, and you won't see that glue line on the front because there's a face frame.
Yeah.
So, if you really have trouble with half blinds, don't cut them.
Biscuits.
Use biscuits. Use a domino. Use, No one knows but you.
Yeah, I hate cutting dovetails that don't show.
Yeah, it's like, what's the point?
Yeah. It's like the double blind dovetail that really looks like a miter. Nah.
Yeah, I mean, that joint's ridiculous. I mean, because there are other ways to make something that's just as strong, like floating tenons or, what have you. But,
yeah, I think if you're going to go hand cut dovetails and you want to do the through dovetails, one of the best aids I've ever had is a skew chisel. If you have a spare chisel, it's definitely worth making a skew chisel.
What did you just? I thought you said one of the best dates I ever had was a skew chisel.
Is that what I said?
I think that's what you said.
One of the best dates.
Was that for senior prom?
Skew chisel.
Holding it up for the picture.
That's just how I parked my dad's car so it wouldn't get dented in the parking lot. All right, let's move on to more questions. This one comes from Tom, and this is going to be a good one. Are there any bandsaws, planers, or jointers that are currently made in the USA that you would recommend? I know they will be more expensive and probably border on professional/commercial grade. That's okay.
Well, I will say, first of all, we can't recommend what we're about to tell you about because we've never tested them or used them. And I will say this, they are definitely not on the border of professional commercial grade. They are well within the heartland of professional commercial grade, industrial grade. There is a company in the United States that makes machinery like bandsaws and jointers and table saws, and they do all the foundry work at their plant in Minnesota, Northfield, Minnesota, I believe. And the company is called Northfield.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the reputation of Northfield Machinery is fantastic.
Yes.
A lot of our authors have
old stuff.
Old stuff.
Yeah, really. And he says that, they might be more expensive.
But that's okay.
But that's okay. All right. So
it better be.
I don't have the exact prices with me because I left it at my desk, but I'll just say the number 8 medium, the 8-inch medium duty joiner.
The little 8-inch joiner, just like you get at the home center.
Medium duty. Not even their industrial duty.
No, we're not talking 3-phase 5-horse.
No.
Well, it probably is, but it's not their heavy duty joiner, which they have a heavy duty joiner. That one, I believe, started at approximately $12,000. Started at $12,000.
Yeah.
They have a 12-inch.
Yeah, if you want the tables, it's more.
But here's the thing. So that's a lot of money. But the 12-inch, you were saying, is not that much more.
It was like $1,000 more.
So go for the 12-inch.
Go for the 12-inch.
And then to add a bird helical cutter
head. It was only like $950.
So you got to go 12-inch with the bird head. So that's probably going to set you back maybe $14,000.
$14,000-$15,000.
But that's okay.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime purchase. And if you ever want to sell it, the retail value, it is astronomical. You can get not quite all of it back. quite a bit back.
How do you know that?
Because I often look at that used machinery sites.
Northfields do sell really well. And,
yes.
Northfield also, their smallest bandsaw, which I think is not too small,
20
is
inch.
20 inch.
Sure.
I would love a 20-inch bandsaw.
Yes.
I have a 19-inch. I need that extra inch. Those, I believe, started around 20 grand. Oh, I wish I'd brought those numbers. But their table saw, this is without a sliding table, mind you, so you are sacrificing. That started around, I think, 15 grand.
Yes. And your planer's about the same for 18-inch planer?
I think the planers were
maybe a little more
north towards 20.
Yeah.
So, a little more expensive.
So that's a lot of money, but it does bring up the point, if you are looking for American-made iron, good quality, you can go old stuff.
Yeah. That's, I mean, unless this guy is, was one of the original founders of Microsoft or Apple, look for used iron.
Yeah.
And I have an old Oliver, which is another really good American-made machinery company from back in the day. It's about 100 years old now, and I probably have like 1,300 into it. That's it, and it's awesome. 12-inch joiner, 8-inch foot long beds. Did I say that right? 8-inch foot long, 8 foot long beds. It's a great machine.
Not each, as you don't have a 16-foot joiner.
No, it's an 8 foot total in length. And, even my table saw, which isn't that old, is a Delta Unisaw from about 1969.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where it was made, but it's a great piece of machinery.
Yeah, and you can kind of balance your purchases out if you want. The big iron for like a jointer, maybe you go big on the jointer and maybe the table saw, and you can save a little money by getting a benchtop planer, try to balance things out if you needed to. But
I mean, to be honest, I can see going old iron for a jointer. And the reason I did that was because I cannot afford a new 12-inch jointer.
Right.
They're just like a Powermatic is going to be like $5,000 or something like that. And then if you want to go for something comparable, something like an SCMI or something like that, you're talking like 15, 20 grand. So you can get a good machine, 12-inch or bigger, for, a reasonable amount of money for a joiner. For a table saw, it's like, listen, there are a lot of great table saws available right now. I mean, really good machines. And they have riving knives. Yeah. And they have
good fences.
Good fences and
good
dust collection.
Yeah.
So I don't
some
think
of them won't cut your fingers off.
Some of them are malicious, and they will.
And they will.
Yeah. And I think the same would go for a bandsaw. I know some guys really like old bandsaws.
Seems like big old bandsaws is almost the most common old machine.
Yeah, next to maybe joiners. It's one of those two.
They look cool when you redo them. You get them, all painted up nice and shiny. And
the problem is dust collection, man.
Yeah,
dust collection.
Yeah. You know what? I really think the very best value in old machinery is an older drill press. It doesn't even have to be a big giant guy, but like an old Delta or old Walker Turner, really nice, either benchtop or floor standing models, because there were tons and tons of these in factories, and especially the benchtop where there'd be a whole assembly line where you might have a dozen drill presses set up for various things. Really nice, well-made, nice castings, some cool, funky, old-looking things, and that tend to work really, really well. And the problem for me is like any new drill press, the depth stops aren't good. The fit and finish is horrible. It's like, okay, maybe the table does crank up and down, which is a nice feature, but I don't know, unless you're spending a lot of money on a really good new drill press, if you just want a drill press, you can spend, I don't know, I'll throw this number out there. I think you can spend probably $500 or $600 on an old drill press and have a really nice piece of equipment in your shop. I have an old Buffalo drill press, which I inherited from an old neighbor, which is in that category, and I love it. It's one of my favorite tools.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, Mike was not suggesting that all new drill presses are junk.
Did I say that?
He didn't say that.
No, he did not say that.
I said the ones I want, I can't afford.
The ones you want, you can't afford.
It's sort of like, I'm from California, and someone says, would you ever want to move back? It's yes, but the areas I want to move to are sort of a non-starter. Yeah. So the answer is no, I would not want to move back to California.
That's my answer for joiners. All the joiners I wanted, I could not afford. So I went and got a used one.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now that we're on a tool topic, it's time for our all-time favorite tool of all time for this week.
All right.
Hit us up, Mike.
Yeah. Let me see what I said. I don't have it written down. Oh, I see. I do. It's not a new one. I've used it before. It's the old, wide, sharp chisel. Can be short, can be long, but it's that tool that I use. And I say this specifically because I've used it in 3 specific instances where it really, really shines. One is doing Kumiko work. I was doing a demonstration there, and rather than a block plane, which I've tried to do all the angles on my parts, I now use just a short, wide little Japanese chisel. The Japanese part is not critical. The sharp part is really critical, and I can do really fine, accurate work with that. The little pins I was talking about on the breadboard that attach it to the batten, cut it close with a saw, flush trim saw, and pull out my chisel and pair that flush. And I actually shot a quick video of that, and on Instagram it had over 100,000 hits.
Wow.
Views.
There's all the justification and legitimacy you need.
So obviously it sort of struck a chord with many people, like, wow, that's kind of cool.
How'd that make you feel, Mike, to have 100,000 people watch your video?
Well, strangely empty.
I don't think strangely. He's just not surprisingly empty.
And then we were doing some miter boxes with the little table sawed splines. And of course, we did everything just on a big old massive belt sander, but I demonstrated method. Well, if you don't have a big old massive belt sander, pull out a chisel and cut the little splines fairly flush and get the chisel and pare them right down. And zip, zip, zip.
I like big power sanders for that because it allows me to turn my rectangular box into a circle. When I do it.
That's one of those tools where there's as much technique and finesse involved in using it well as there is with any hand tool you can think of.
Right. Yeah. There's power sanders like that are dangerous tools in the wrong hand. Yeah.
Yes.
Really dangerous.
They're great for races, though.
Yeah. Well, no, he was not a belt sander. A stationary machine. Sander of some sort, right?
Yes. These were, I have like little stationary belt disc combo thing, but at Mark Adams, where we were doing this, they have those big giant 4-foot long edge sanders where the belt is vertical. But everyone was handled it very well.
Good. Yeah. Good.
Who needs a hand plane?
Oh, maybe I'll go next.
Sure.
So this is a tool that I've been using a lot recently because we are. I live in an old house, and we've been renovating it the entire time, and we're finally just throwing all caution, everything to the wind, and we're going to completely finish the renovation here by the end of August. So I've been hanging a lot of trim, and that means I'm not using a hammer and nail. I'm using a pneumatic nailer, as they should be called. They are not nail guns.
18 gauge?
Yeah, for most of the trim, it's an 18 gauge.
Cordless or?
Not cordless, which is getting me to my favorite tool of all time for this week, is my compressor for this. I have a compressor which came to me from Mike Pekovich through another person. And I keep that in my shop. It's like a big, giant sausage of a thing.
Yeah, I don't know how you got that for free, but
I did. Anyways, but it was, when I had when that was my only compressor, and I would have to run like a 50-foot hose up into my house, and it's loud. When it goes on, it literally shakes the house.
Right.
So I just got tired of that, and I said, you know what? I need to have another compressor. So I went to get a little hot dog compressor carrying kind.
Right.
And I ended up buying one from a company called Roll Air, which all they do is make compressors. And they're really good professional grade compressors. And the model I bought is the JC-10, which I actually did review in Tools and Materials after I bought it.
Okay, never mind.
Because I liked it so much. And what I like about it is that it is, you just don't hear it when it's compressing air. It comes on and you just hear this kind of like, and and that's it. And no one says anything. No, you can still hear the TV. You can talk in a normal voice. The house doesn't shake like there's an earthquake. It's light, and it's like a 2.5 gallon tank, and it has more than enough air for me to hang a piece of trim.
Yes.
Pop, and then go cut the other piece. When I come back and I maybe put another nail or two in, it might come on.
Right.
But maybe not. And so it doesn't really, there's more than enough air in there for one person to use it for hanging trim or putting together jigs or whatever. And it's quiet. It's just amazing how quiet it is. So
yeah. The reason why I no longer have that 35 gallon compressor is because it was too big to do exactly what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And then too small to do anything beyond using nail guns, like pneumatic sanders. No.
Right.
Like true spray finishing. No, you don't, you need something bigger. So you either need something bigger if you're going to do all that, which is great, go for it. But if not, the little tiny guys do everything. Unfortunately, my oilless compressor, which like most of them are notoriously loud. Yeah. And because it's small, they come on a lot. So those are the two things. The coming on a lot only bothers me because it's really loud when it comes on.
Right.
So just the fact that you got a quiet one.
You're lucky. My brother.
They designed that one to be quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My brother had given me a compressor years ago because he had bought a new one. And I thought, oh, great, now I can finally start using my nail guns. But it was pretty big, but it was so darn loud. I couldn't use it. Back then, my kids were still kind of young and taking naps and stuff. So I was like, well, this is my garage tool. And I actually bought, last year, I bought a DeWalt pancake compressor. It's still a little bit loud, but certainly easier to move.
Yeah, that big compressor it makes more. The noise that it makes and what it does is more disruptive to the household than my 12-inch joiner, my 13-inch benchtop planer, my table saw.
It's the noise. It's like having a Harley in your basement. It just rattles your teeth. At least that's the way I felt. So
it's great. I use that compressor, which I'm internally grateful to Mike that I have it because for my vacuum press.
Okay,
and it's great for that. Except when it comes on.
Sweet.
Well, all right.
I'll step up. My favorite tool of all time for this week is my little cheaply made, shop-made router table, which I haven't used it a whole lot because my shop has been sort of a disorganized mess, and so I finally got it set, and I'm rocking and rolling in an organized fashion. So it's finally being put to good use, and I kind of cobbled it together out of 2x4s and some MDF, and Mike had cleaned out his shop, and he had 4 casters that he wasn't using, so I glommed onto those and put them on the bottom. But it's got a nice big top. The fence rides in T-tracks. I scavenged an old Freud fence just to get the dust collector hose attachment point. And I have zero clearance inserts that get dovetailed into the fence. So whenever I need to replace it, I can just kind of cut a clean one. Got a just some router lift. That was like the most expensive part. But otherwise, the material's really cheap. I built, the top isn't doubled up MDF, but I put sort of like a torsion box frame underneath. So there are a bunch of 2x4s that are supporting the top up to above, so there's no sagging. And I also, one of the things I did, I wanted the big top, but I also designed it so that the router is not exactly centered in the top because I wanted a lot of space kind of in front of the bit, just in case I was going to use or route or work with a bigger workpiece. Right. So I kind of offset it, and I've been using it on this cabinet project that I'm making, and I'm really liking it a lot. So that's my tool.
Here's another reason to offset the location of the router lift or your router and your table, because like you said, sometimes you want to have most of the space in front of it, but sometimes you need a lot of space between the fence and the bit. Say like if you're cutting a stop dado on a cabinet side, you might need, and then you can just turn your router table around and turn the fence around and use it from the back, and you have a lot of space between the bit and the fence now.
It just blew my mind.
Yeah. So if you put it in the center, it's always the same.
Right.
But by offsetting it, you get that advantage.
Yeah, I think the router table is probably the last holdout in terms of where it makes sense to build a stationary thing in your shop versus buying it. Maybe a workbench, obviously a workbench too, but in terms of, because we had the articles, build your own table saw, build your own bandsaw, build your own drum sander. It's like, no, router table. Yeah, it's a good idea.
But that's because you're not really building the tool. I mean, the tool's the router and the lift.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're not building those. You're just building the thing that holds them.
Right.
You know? So yeah, it still makes sense. Although, don't hesitate to buy a router table.
No, there's plenty of good ones on the market.
There's wonderful router tables on the market.
With great dust collection.
Mike is just like killing all of our advertisers today. You should never buy a router table. All the drill presses suck.
I don't think he said that. Anyway, so that's my tool, and I think it's time for, I think we have time for one last question. This one comes from Doug, and so Doug says, I recently bought the Grizzly G0 715P hybrid table saw. I really like it, but it came with only one riving knife. I bought an aftermarket thin kerf knife, and it's fussy and time-consuming to align the knife with the blade. My question is this: should I simply keep my standard kerf blade on the saw for both ripping and cross-cutting to avoid having to fuss with adjusting the riving knife with every blade change? I guess the bottom line is, should he keep one blade on the saw?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of answers here. I think for the most part, I only keep I use a combination blade for everything. I know, Matt, you don't, but okay, so even if you want to switch out your blades from thin to regular curve, just put the thin curve riving knife on there and leave it on even for your wider blades. It's not that big of a deal.
Right.
Yeah. So put that one on there, even though it's fussy to adjust.
Yeah.
Adjust it once and leave it.
Because a lot of saws come with a knife which can accommodate both the thin and regular curve. So, I mean,
that's the other thing I'm kind of curious about is, I mean, he says that it doesn't. I guess I'm assuming that he tested the thin kerf blade and that the board was getting
jammed
on the riving knife.
Right.
Because we did a review of table saws like 2 summers ago or something with Riley Johnson, and it was here, and I'm looking at all these riving knives, and almost all of them were made to work with both thin and thick standard kerf blades. So I don't know.
So, but Ben, you said you had this Grizzly, and you said the riving, it didn't come with the thin one. Did you check to see if the standard knife fit a thin kerf blade?
No, I just had a standard kerf blade.
Okay.
Blade. So,
Yeah.
But I don't think that you need to put a thin kerf blade on that saw for power purposes or anything like that.
All right.
Yeah.
But no one asked you about corn dogs. But yeah, I switch. You always have a combo blade on yours.
I do too.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah, I switch out blades.
I the only time I've been switching up blades is when I put a dado blade or dado set in. But I kind of treat my table saw. I mean, I've got a contractor saw, so it's okay, gets the job done. But I treat it as sort of a rough cutting tool anyway. And as long as it gives me a straight, perpendicular cut, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, I have an 80-tooth crosscut blade, and I really like that blade. And for cutting, when I cut miters at the table saw for boxes, I'll switch out to a rip blade if I'm going to rip something that's more than say like an inch thick. Mm-hmm. And I also use the rip blade for grooves, so because it's got a flat bottom kerf. Yep. So you end up switching blades out a lot for different things, like dado set, or maybe you're putting in a dovetail blade for dovetails, and
I have specialty blades, dado,
joinery
box
blades.
joint. I have a flat top grinding blade for my little square bottom grooves and dovetails. Mm-hmm. So I would say unless I'm using a specialty blade, combos typically fine. And I have a couple combos. I have like 3 different combination blades. I tend to get them sharpened at the same time, and then depending on what I'm doing, if I need something, I'll go ahead and stick the sharp one in there, sort of like my hand planes. But
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Tune in again in 2 weeks on September 2nd for our next episode. Remember to visit findwoodworking.com to keep up with the tool giveaway for our 40th anniversary. The current prize is a combination package of Senko's 21 gauge pin nailer and their 1 gallon compressor.
That's nice.
It's a pretty sweet deal.
You can enter, Mike. Enter as many times as you'd like.
I'm just going to use it until we find out who the
we have
winner
to send
is.
it away.
Yeah.
That's not true. He's lying.
That makes it more valuable to all of my Instagram followers.
To win these prizes, you have to enter by August 22nd. To enter, go to findwoodworking.com/40 sweeps. That's the number 40. Again, it's findwoodworking.com/40 sweeps. Also, remember to send your questions and comments to shoptalk@taunton.com. Please spread the word about Shop Talk Live to your woodworking friends and neighbors. You can catch the podcast via iTunes, stream it on the web at shoptalklive.com, or catch us on iHeartRadio. Finally, you can keep up with Fine Woodworking on Instagram and on Facebook, and look for all of us on Instagram as well. Thanks for listening, and have fun in the shop. I'm your host and Fine Woodworking editor, Tom McKenna. And with me this episode are Executive Art Director Mike Pekovich.
Hey, guys.
Special Projects Editor Matt Kinney.
Hello, everyone.
Our web producer, Ben Strano.
Hi, guys.
And Jeff Ruse, as always, is in the house taking care of business, trying to keep... I'm going to start that again. Sorry.